A warm welcome to you all. This is the second of our 3 CPD sessions from the Crafts Council Craft School Material World. These CPDs are designed and developed to enhance your time with us as you deliver craft school with your students. My name is Melissa Jamal and I am the Education Manager at the Crafts Council. We also have joining us today from the Crafts Council, Faith, our Learning and Sector Support Coordinator. For each session, we invite an education specialist to share their insights into craft teaching and learning, alongside a craft professional who will also deliver a make-along workshop based on one of our 3 themes, which are renewable materials, reclaim and reuse, and creative mending. Today, we have a focus on creative mending. For today's make-along, you should have received a list of materials and tools. So if you don't have that, go and grab it now. I'm going to pop this on the screen just to remind you what they are. And yeah, feel free, if you don't have the resources now, to pop back and refer to this video online when you do have your resources. So for those who are taking part live, we will have an opportunity to share at some point what you have made, especially at the end of the session. We really welcome questions, sharing, reflections. There will be a time to reflect. And of course, if you've got any questions throughout the session, please feel free to use the chat feature. Faith and I will keep an eye on that. So that's a welcome from me. We have a talk by Paula Briggs. We have our make-along creative mending session, have your resources ready, and then I will let you know what's coming up for Craft School Material World, and at the end we'll have some time to reflect. Our first presenter today is Paula Briggs. Paula is the co-founder of AccessArt, which was founded in 1999. AccessArt is one of the leading providers of the digital visual arts resources in the UK, providing inspiration and ideas to the whole and wide community. It's an utter privilege to have you today, Paula, and thank you for offering to speak to us. So over to you. Thank you very much.
Lovely. Thank you very much. Shall I replace the share?
Yes, I'm going to stop my recording.
Is that good? Are we all good? You can hear me, you can see me. Great, thank you. So yes, thank you. Thank you for inviting AccessArt to this talk. We're really happy to be here. And if you're watching this on the recording as well, then thank you. Nice to be here for you as well. So yes, AccessArt is a registered charity. We're also a subject association for art as well. When I use the word art, I do mean craft and design as well. That's implicit in everything we do. I guess what we're trying to do in this session is share with you some of the ideas behind AccessArt, the way we think about teaching art, and in particular, how they might relate to your craft school exploration. So that's what I'll be doing in this talk. I've embedded some links in the PowerPoint to the AccessArt website, so I can either share the PowerPoint at the end, I don't know if that works for the Crafts Council, or I can share some links directly, whichever works best. And yes, answer any questions, obviously, as we go along. Before I start the presentation, I was thinking about craft school as an opportunity for teachers and for pupils. And, you know, we're great fans of the Craft Council at AccessArt and great fans of craft school. We think it's an amazing opportunity. I guess this is the same message really as Crafts Council's given as well, is that I think it's a fantastic opportunity, not just to do something different, but really to try out new ways of teaching in the classroom. So, you know, you've got the support, the resources and the inspiration from the craft school to really open out your teaching approach. So I guess we just encourage you to take this opportunity to try things that you might not normally try. And I think I'm not just talking about the activities themselves, I'm talking about the teaching approach, the pedagogy. And then watch what happens. Watch what happens with your pupils. How do they respond? And don't try and second guess that. Really look out for surprises, because I think you'll be surprised. Whenever we go into schools, it's always the pupils that the teachers doesn't expect to respond well that generally do respond really well. So that's nice that you've got this space, and then think about how you can let that inform your future practice in the classroom. So I really do believe that initiatives like Craft School have, longevity. They will give your teaching new legs. So hopefully that works for you. I wanted to start off talking about a phrase that we use a lot on AccessArt website, which is called design through making. And we've had previous conversations with the Crafts Council. They use the phrase make first. And there's actually a book I found the other day called Make to Know. I can't remember who wrote it, but it's a very lovely book. Lots of artists I know use the phrase make to know, but we're all meaning the same thing, whether it's design through making, make first, or make to know. And that is an understanding, I guess, that when we're working with materials, they have a life of their own. And when we're working with ideas, they have a life of their own. And the two things sometimes collide in wonderful ways. But if we go too far down the line of thinking about the ideas in our head, i.e. designing first and then drawing it on paper, and then try to make those designed ideas in reality, there can often be a mismatch, which leads or can lead to frustration in the classroom for pupils. So what we mean by design through making, and I think what the Crafts Council mean through Make First, is that we give children access to materials from the offset. Obviously, that access to materials is within a structure and there's an intent behind the session. But what we advise on the website is not to design things on paper first. That may not apply to everything in craft school, but I think it applies to lots of things that you will encounter. So there is a little video and animation, it's just 2 minutes long on the AccessArt website called Design Through Making, and it's aimed at teachers to help you understand this design through making concept. I won't play it now, but I'll send you the link. You can play it in the staff room just to help understand what it is about drawing on paper that can sometimes lead to disappointment. Because, of course, we have wild, fantastic ideas and children have amazing imaginations. And the drawing on the paper has a value in and of itself. But once you start making, once you pick up those materials, that will lead to more ideas, and those ideas will be more appropriate to the material that you're exploring. And I think the thing that always strikes me when I'm working in schools is that children have so little experience of materials, of course, and even less experience of materials now in many ways than they did a few years ago because of all the time spent working digitally. So really, they're at the very, very early stages of design, of craft, of understanding how materials work. So give them space just to explore the materials. There's a lovely concept I came across a few weeks ago called adjacent possibility. I don't know if anyone's heard of it, but it was a term that was coined, I think, by a biologist in evolutionary terms. And it's based on the idea that we're all at an edge. We're all on the edge of what we know, and we can, if we give ourselves permission, explore what's around us. And at that edge, we have choices. We can decide to make different choices about what we do. So in evolutionary terms, it means that, we might evolve a certain way and then we go to a new edge and we can evolve a little bit further. And it's a very incremental process. And I think design through making is a lot like that. So when you're making with your hands, children have suddenly realised what a possibility is. There's a new thing that could happen, a new stitch, a new way of bending a piece of cardboard, a new way of putting two materials together that they would never have thought of if they were just presented with pen and paper. So design through making, I think, is a really important fundamental concept. So that's your starting point, I think. And then implicit in design through making is giving space to children to do what we call on AccessArt playful making. And playful making is exactly what it is. It's creating a space in your classroom where pressure is taken away so that everyone feels able to really explore. And I think the idea of play, if you're here or if you're watching this from an early years setting, you'll know the benefit of play. And one of the things that AccessArt does in our curriculum for primary schools is try and extend that period of play. So we try and give permission for that play to continue throughout primary school when we're teaching and learning about art. And we're just working on our Key Stage 3 curriculum, and that element of play and exploration is still there. It gets knocked out of children as we go through school, as we all know, because there's not space. There isn't seem to be space for it in the curriculum. And yet, if you are one of those students that then goes on to do a foundation course after sixth form, suddenly it's all about play again. And if you talk to artists and craftspeople and designers, it's all about play again. So I think we need to be really careful in schools that we don't forget play is really important. And the art room is a space in the class, even now, even within the curriculum we've got, to take, to benefit that, to let pupils have that space and practice to playfully make. And actually I was talking to a teacher from a pupil referral school, and they were saying that even outside art, what they see in those pupils in the pupil referral school is that they were never given time and space to play. They never were helped to play, and they mean that in a social sense as well, everything that play entails. So it is a really, really important skill and really important for well-being as well. But it is through that playful making that we give pupils space to experiment with materials. And leading on from playful making, and something else that I think we are talking pupils out of at the moment, is willingness to be in a place of not knowing. And again, if you talk to artists and craftspeople and designers, they will say that that is their starting point. Because if they knew what they were going to be doing with their work, they probably wouldn't do it. They wouldn't have the appetite or the interest to do it. Making the work, designing through making, is a process that artists go on to find out what it is they want to do. They don't know at the beginning what it is they will be doing, or even sometimes what it is they're trying to say through the work. It's all discovered through the process. But I think we all know that in education at the moment, and the way the curriculum's been for many years, knowing is valuable. So it's a knowledge-rich curriculum. So we're kind of, creating children that really want to know the answer because they know they're going to be measured on the answer. And inadvertently, even though that has got some benefits, inadvertently, I think we're creating generations of children who are really scared not to know. And not knowing isn't bad. We just need to feel okay with not knowing and feel safe enough to explore. And again, the art room, I think, is the place where we can say to children, it's okay that we don't know what we're doing yet. We've got these perimeters, we've got this loose structure, and you've got the space to explore and find out and discover. And that's what creativity is. I also really appreciate that for a teacher who has also been through that education system, sometimes it's hard for you to have a classroom where you can feel confident enough to say to the class, we don't know what we're going to do today, we're just going to explore these materials, or we're just going to explore these materials and see if we can do this. But, there is a greater move, I think, to curriculum designers and to people interested in education to valuing this place of not knowing and understanding, and we'll talk about this later on, understanding the ways we can still appreciate and assess what's happened in that space without being governed too strongly by assessment, because it is assessment that makes us scared of saying, well, we don't know. So we'll talk about that in a few minutes. I also want to spend a little bit of time thinking about the word craft and thinking about it as a verb, as in to craft. And I don't know what the Crafts Council think about this. I've never spoken to you about this, and I'm sure you'll have your own wise understanding of it. But, even in my own head, when I think of craftspeople, especially represented by the Crafts Council, I think of them as being, this very skilled set of people who have practiced their craft, and they are very able, they're very dexterous and technically able, and the ideas are very exciting, and I see it as a real a high quality thing. And I'm sure that may or may not be true, but I wouldn't ever want that notion to put pressure on a school or on a pupil when we talk about craft. So let's appreciate as well that your pupils are at the other end of their journey. They're just beginning. They're just beginning to understand what it's like to put two materials together. And they're beginning to understand what those two materials, when they put together, might convey in terms of an emotion or an experience. So I think it's maybe helpful to think about the word craft as a verb, to craft, and that we can balance out that playful making and that exploratory making, where everything's loose and people are really discovering things and there's an energy, with time spent thinking about crafting to spend time to make something better than it was. So I think have those two ideas in your head. They're not opposite to each other, they balance each other out, but there are times for exploratory playful making, which is fun and energetic, and then there are times for helping pupils stay with the material and stay with the process and refine it without killing off that exploratory making. And I think those two things, exploratory making and then that word to craft, which ultimately will gather those skills, they weave in and out. It's not one, we don't do playful making and then we craft, and we never do playful making again. They weave in and out of each other, and that's a good teaching practice. So while we're trying to get children to stay with, to craft, I think we also need to talk about resistance of materials. And we've been teaching practical art in schools for many, many years. And I think it is really true to say that since children are spending more time in a digital world where everything's slippy and easy and quick and dry and clean, we are seeing more resistance to staying in the physical world. So that might manifest itself by somebody saying, well, the clay's all wet and I don't like it on my hands, or, you know, it's hard to bend this wire, it makes my fingers hurt, or I can't cut this wood with these secateurs, whatever it is. You know, there's a physical world which isn't always, I wouldn't say pleasurable, but it's frustrating to many, especially when we've become so conditioned to digital. So I think the word resistance often is seen as a negative word. I think even on the internet, we're fed the idea that we should just accept things, that we are enough and we can accept things as they are, and that's fine. But I do think there's danger that we're not teaching our children how to be in a positive way in a world which does resist them, because of course the physical world is resisting. And again, this goes beyond art. This is about the way we show up in the world, because there's resistance when we meet other people as well. So dealing with resistance is a really good thing. And again, I think it's in the art lesson we can explore that. So as an example, the image on the right-hand side was a session we did with some children, excuse me, where they were building Anglo-Saxon inspired architectural pieces with personalities. So we asked them to give them a name after they'd worked on them. So they looked at the forms of Anglo-Saxon architecture, if architecture is not too grand a word for Anglo-Saxon architecture, building, and then they made their own, designed through making, just had lots of materials. They made their own. This was year 4, I think. They had 2 afternoons and they were exhausted. They had their head in the hands. It was really, really hard work, really hard work. And they stayed with it and they made amazing sculptures, and they learned an awful lot, not just about how to make sculptures and how to put materials together, but about how to stay with it and how to manipulate the materials and how to go through and beyond. So I think helping our children stay in that world of resistance is really important. So, of course, because you're in that world of resistance, there are problems sometimes. Sorry about my voice. There are problems sometimes. And all that playful activity suddenly becomes painful. Literally, my fingers hurt. And mentally, the thing I'm making doesn't match up with my ideas in my head. And again, this is where we as facilitators and teachers need to help our pupils through this. And there's another animation, 250 word animation on the website called Making is Hard, which is exactly about this, which again, I won't play now, but you can watch, I'll send the link, which just explains really how what we say to children, our message to children is, and to adults, is that it's not, it's not hard because you can't do it. It's hard because you're actually doing it. That's what it's like. And I'm sure any craftsperson or sculptor or painter will know that themselves. It's not hard because you're failing to do it. It's hard because you're actually in the middle of it and you're doing it. So again, as facilitator, we need to help children stay in that space and help them through it. which does involve giving them rest, because I think it's not always appreciated that making, not just making physically, but painting, drawing, whatever it is taxing on the body and mind. It is exhausting, I think, making art. It's not always as relaxing as we make out. So let's just talk a little bit about measuring success and expectations. And again, this will depend entirely, I think, on as a teacher, your own experience of art. So, if you've had lots of experience yourself, maybe even as a creative person, I think how you measure success will be very different to if you're a teacher and you feel like you haven't had much experience of teaching art, or you're not confident in your own creativity. If you are more confident in your own creativity, you've probably got a wider understanding of what success looks like to you. And that understanding of what success looks like to you, I'm sure, will go beyond just the finished article that you end up with, if there is something that's finished at the end of it. And it includes all the process along the way, all the skills you've gained along the way, all the different ways you've had to be, the things you've learned about yourself and about other people along the way. If you don't have that experience, I think the guidance would be, don't limit your measuring of success when you look at the children's work to anything too technical. I think that's where we go when we're less confident. We always look for some kind of precise or perfect outcome and technical progression. But art is about so much more than that. So don't limit it to technical. Be aware as well of your own aesthetic sense and see if that is affecting how you judge the children's work. Because I think we've all got our own aesthetic and we've all got ideas about what we like. And our job isn't to nudge children towards that or to judge them on that. So use this as an opportunity to widen your own sense of what you think is valuable. So you're educating yourself, and let the children see that. So again, it goes back to being brave enough and feeling safe enough to say, I don't know yet. I think when you're teaching art, the best modeling you can do is to go on the journey with the children and let the children see you modeling what it's like to explore and what it's like to learn and grow. And the other thing we see lots of schools doing, and it kind of holds them back, is to look around what other schools are doing. And we get asked a lot of questions like, well, what would a year 6 sculpture look like? And there's no answer to that, because there are no national standards defined in art. So you don't have to look over your shoulder at another school. All you have to be concerned with is what the progression is like within your school, and that will change over time. So don't feel like you need to be doing a certain thing. All you need to be doing is giving children an experience and understanding how they've moved along their understanding and outcomes. So to help you do that, this is my last slide and my voice is definitely going now, but I think because we're talking about the visual arts, because we're talking about craft, and you are going to end up with an outcome, don't forget to think and talk about the intention behind the outcome as well. Because often, and there's no wonder, often the intention will lag ahead of the outcome. So the final thing that people see doesn't incorporate everything. So talk to pupils about what they've been doing. Don't just look at the final result, and really listen to what they say their successes are, because I think they might surprise you with what they felt they'd succeeded in. And we've used the word there, I've said, encourage felt sense of success, because art is a felt subject. It's not just an intellectual subject. So we can talk about what we like. We can ask pupils what they like, what went well, but also get them to think about how it felt inside them when they were making it, including negative words, because making can be frustrating. But how do they feel? How do they feel about the process, and how do they feel about the outcome? I think is a really important thing to talk about. Document at every stage of the journey, because this is a journey. So you're not just looking at the end result, you are looking at all the stages in between, including all those tangents where something went wrong and something had to be done to change that. So document that, and if you can, get the children to take the photographs as well. because they can easily do that and they can learn a new skill at the same time. And then if you are creating displays in corridors about craft school, we would again encourage you to include all stages of the journey in that exhibition. So again, it's not just outcome, it's about the pupil voice as well and their experience. Okay, I think I'm finished there then. Thank you, Melissa. Just to say that there is an AccessArt network group on Facebook that you can join. And I've put the Instagram link there as well, if anybody wants us to look us up on Instagram. And if anyone wants to get in touch afterwards, there's my email address as well. Okay, I'm going to have a drink of water now.
That was absolutely brilliant. Thank you. Just so insightful and so much food for thought and real true guidance, I think, throughout the whole challenge. And Paula, you've mentioned a lot of the key fundamental principles of Make First and this whole challenge itself throughout. So thank you. And I really like the fact that we ended on the fact that the students' intentions are really important. And when it comes to submission, we have got designated space for students' voices to be heard as the maker, for them to talk about their experience and what their creations mean to them and the journey that they went on, using photographs as evidence for this journey. So I think that's a really lovely, poignant place to end it too. So thank you. Thank you so much for your time and for your experience and expertise. Up next, we have a make-along session with Ophelia Dos Santos. Ophelia is a Welsh textile artist and a researcher based in Cardiff, South Wales. Through patchwork and skill sharing workshops and CPDs like this, Ophelia sparks dialogue on climate change, equity, and the wasteful overconsumption nature of the modern fashion industry. And by collaborating with communities and teachers, she highlights the power of collective action to address the complexities of climate change. It's a privilege to have you, Ophelia. Thank you so much. And I'm going to hand it over to you.
Cool. Thank you. That was amazing, Paula. I really resonated with what you were saying about play and the need for play, because I think we all take artwork too seriously sometimes as artists. We just think we should create the most amazing work ever. Okay, so I'm going to share my PowerPoint. So as Mel had already mentioned, I'm a Welsh textile artist and researcher based in Cardiff. And as my practice has developed over the last few years, I've been more drawn towards history, local histories and heritage research. I'm joining you today from my workshop in Cardiff Bay, which was once my grandfather's carpentry workshop. So the place itself feels very sentimental. And I think through my work, I tried to have maybe a dialogue between past and present. I'm interested in the passing down of skills, and kind of like, I don't know, just being surrounded by things that are almost unfinished and kind of stuff that my grandfather worked on but never got to finish. And I just think, like, yeah, it's just an interesting place to work. And also like the local history of Cardiff Bay, and being a huge importer and exporter of coal here in Wales. And I'm kind of like interested in Wales from a colonial perspective as well. But I won't talk too much. So see, these are some of my works. I create large patchwork pieces. I sometimes work on clothing as well, like upcycling and stuff like that. So this piece is called Wasted on Us, and I created this in 2023, so nearly 2 years ago now. And this is an example of how I have reflected on the social and environmental impacts of textile waste within, from a Wales perspective, but also how thinking about global responsibility and where our waste might end up. As I patched together these kind of discarded fabrics, I thought about the unknown makers, the people who have held this fabric before me, where it might have been and where it could have potentially ended up if I hadn't have kind of reused it and reclaimed it. So a little bit about that. For anyone that's interested in textiles, there's a great book by Claire Hunter called The Threads of Life. And I really like this quote, so I'm just going to read out this quote. Textiles were the most versatile form of visual messaging, displayable, wearable, portable, recyclable. They could carry information from place to place, from person to person. Embroidery as part of textile traditions have served as a medium through which stories, traditions, cultural heritage were passed down through generations. And I'm a bit of a textile geek, so I love learning about textile history. Again, I think it plays an important part of storytelling and preserving stories. So with an increased dependence on new technologies, it's crucial not to overlook the power of simple solutions. So textiles is textiles or hand embroidery is a powerful way of skill sharing and a powerful way of a powerful climate solution. Repairing jeans, for example, or an old top can be a small kind of small but impactful, resilient way of climate participation. We don't have to make these huge gestures when it comes to climate participation. It can be subtle, it can be inflective and personal. So I like to talk about embroidery in a way that is empowering to people who practice it, whether they're new to the craft or they've been crafting with hand embroidery for years. So hand embroidery is an accessible activity and can be adapted. I'll talk a little bit about how hand embroidery can be adapted in workshops. I'm sorry, my laptop's having a freak. How hand embroidery can be adapted for all ages. Number 3, hand embroidery is a universal craft. We all have a story of textiles, and I think it's one of those things that you can easily spark up conversations with people on, whether that is a special blanket that's been passed down or our grandmothers who have taught us how to sew. We all have some sort of connection with fabric. Fabric touches us from the moment we are born up until death. So it's a sometimes overlooked part of our lives. And then lastly, slowness, crafting with intention. Like I said, I think I like to have a kind of conversation or dialogue with the past. And I think when you're sewing with hand embroidery, it does force you to be more intentional and mindful when crafting. So a lot of my works have quite heavy or complicated themes, and I think when I can sit down and spend time to think about it, it makes it a lot more meaningful to the work. So this was a workshop that I ran with Back to Basics, who are a women-led charity based in Kenya, Nairobi. I was in Kenya for another project. I work part-time alongside my own practice, and we were in Kenya to do an exhibition. And whilst I was there, I connected with this wonderful group called Back to Basics, and their whole philosophy is about finding simple solutions and sharing simple solutions. And I think this is a great example of how skill sharing can be a non-verbal activity. Most of the women I was working with here, their first language wasn't English, and I don't speak Swahili. So even though there was this huge language barrier, we were still able to communicate through these materials. So yeah, that was a lovely example. Oh. Okay, so on to the hand embroidery. I don't want to talk for too long. So if you're not familiar with hand embroidery, it's simply thread that is passed through fabric to create, you know, to mend or to decorate a fabric. For this embroidery demonstration, you'll need thread, a needle, scissors, an embroidery hoop, and some scrap fabric. And we're going to start by applying the embroidery hoop to the fabric. So we're just going to unscrew the clasp. The smaller hoop goes underneath the fabric, and the larger hoop with the clasp goes on top. And then we're going to tighten it up and pull out the fabric so that the fabric is nice and flat. You don't have any creases. It's nice and taut in the hoop. Next, you're going to grab about 30 centimeters of thread. We're going to thread our needle. I like to lick the end a little bit so you gather all of those finer pieces of thread in one place. And the other end of the thread, you're going to tie a knot. And the knot will act as an anchor when you're threading in and out of the fabric. So you might want to do 2 or 3 knots just so you have a nice big knot. So it should look like that. Next, I'm going to lock my hoop in place. This just makes it easier to have both hands free. So I'm just using a clasp like this. If you're going to teach online, hand embroidery or any kind of textile craft, I would recommend buying a clasp or a grip. So what I'm just going to do, put this down a little bit. I'm going to hook this to the table. This is a bit of a hack. Okay, so these are some of the stitches that I'm going to be walking you through today. We have a run-in stitch, which is this one. We have a back stitch, a chain stitch, French knot, and a lazy daisy stitch. We'll probably do the first 4. So, coming from the back of the fabric, we're going to start by doing a run-in stitch. Come all the way through until we hit that knot at the end and we have all of the fabric on top. And this looks like lines in a road, and you want to keep the stitches as consistent as possible. Obviously, if it's your first time, no worries about this being perfect. So you go in and out. I would say my stitches here are about a little bit less than 1 centimeter each, and then maybe 1/2 centimeter in between. This is probably one of the simplest stitches. So this can be taught for young students ages 5 to 10. And when teaching younger students, I would always start with the simple stitches. I would use bright colors and fabric that can be easily pierced with a needle. I would also recommend pre-threading needles for the students. And there's a way of securing the thread and needle together. I will show you. So that's a running stitch. When I am teaching young students who are about 5 to 10, to save the hassle of the needle coming off the thread, I would thread the needle like this. So I would double it over and I would tie a knot by here so that the needle will stay on the thread, and it saves them coming back to you every 5 minutes to rethread the needle. So yeah, just double it over and a knot by here. So the next stitch I am going to show you is a back stitch, and this can be done simply by returning back on the stitches on the running stitch, and this is how I would teach younger students as well. So you would do a running stitch first, and then you would return back on those stitches and join them up, so you have one consistent line. I would also use larger needles when teaching young students, and these needles, they're not too sharp, so you're avoiding any accidents. So ones that are quite like clearly visible and thick, they're not sharp at all. And if you use fabric that is not woven tightly, then you should get the needle in and out pretty easy. For older students, I would move on to stitches that are a little bit more complicated, like the chain stitch here. And this is a stitch that I use on my own personal artworks. So you start a chain stitch from the back of the fabric like we did the previous stitch. I'm just going to zoom in a little bit. We're going to return back into that same spot that you just came from, to create a loop, and that will be the first step of a chain stitch. And now the next step, you're going to pick up this loop one stitch length over, about a centimetre apart, and pull it through, and there we go, you have your first chain stitch. I really enjoy using this stitch because it creates a thick bold line on top of the fabric that's a bit more noticeable than doing a simple running stitch or back stitch. And a lot of my works include hands and portraits. I think portraits and faces in general, they speak so much to identity, and I really enjoy kind of exploring stories through portraiture, faces, and more recently hands. So, and I would normally pick, well, I wouldn't normally illustrate people who are real people. They're kind of characters. And I would normally draw people with ethnic features, so maybe large noses, larger mouths or lips, or bone structure, because I think they are more effective in graphic drawings, especially with embroidery. So here we go, chain stitch. This is the last stitch I'll do with this color. And I would try doing a chain stitch with older students, so above 10. It will take a few attempts for most people to do a chain stitch. But I think as long as once you start repeating the steps, it can be easy to pick up. Let me grab some more. If you are going to be teaching online, I would recommend, investing in a good quality tripod. You can get ones on Amazon that are about £20, and I've had many of them over the years, and they don't seem to last very long. So if you will be doing this repetitively, there will be it'll be worth your money getting a good tripod. I currently have one that has a overhead arm, which is great for teaching online. So I'm just preparing my thread for another stitch. The one that I have currently is actually about £150, which is obviously quite expensive. I bought this when I had a grant, a development grant last year, and I found it amazing when I'm teaching online. And it's just a bit more sturdy than the ones that you might pick up in, say, Amazon, for example. Okay, so the next stitch will be a French knot. This one right here. So we start from the back of the fabric. Pull the thread through. Hold the, if you're right-handed, I hold the needle close to the fabric, just above the thread. So I'm going to wrap it around 3 times, 1, 2, 3. And it's important when you do a French knot that you're wrapping outwards, not inwards, because if you wrap inwards, your knot will disappear when you pull it through. So what we're going to do, we're going to push the needle back into that same spot that you just came from, and then pull it through. And I would recommend doing this quite slowly so you have control of the thread. There we go. Your first French knot. I'll do that again. One, 2, 3. Back into that same spot here. Embroidery is a great way to explore complicated or difficult topics. I use embroidery to talk about climate change and the importance of mending and maintaining clothes. But it touches all different topics. It can be used to talk about mental health and well-being and the importance of slowing down and using your creativity to express yourself. And again, yeah, it's great for customization of clothes. Generally quite a cheap activity, and it can be adapted for different skill levels. So you might want to, try alternative ways of doing embroidery or other textiles like weaving, for example, as a way to engage students who may have different special educational needs. There's plenty of really interesting and cool ways to incorporate textiles into the classroom. Just have a look on Pinterest, for example, and type in, kids textile crafts, and you'll find loads of ideas. In one project that I did last year, or it might have been the year before actually, I worked with a class of Year 5 children, and we were exploring the themes of identity and belonging. And so I taught the kids some embroidery, stitches. Obviously, some of them didn't quite pick it up, but instead we let the kids do like drawing and painting. So there's no like right way of doing textiles. You can even use glue to fix fabrics together and do patchwork, for example. But with this project that I did with the Year 5 class, they drew out their different images that would symbolize identity and belonging and community. So some of them drew their families or pets, their houses, their favorite football teams, and then once all of the patches were done, and yeah, some of them did embroidery over the images that they drew, I patched all of the pieces together to make a community quilt, and that was a really effective way of exploring identity in the community. 2, 3. And there we have your French knot. So that was our hand embroidery workshop. But yeah, if there's anything that you'd like to learn more on, you can always find me online. I'm sure I can share my. I think
yes.
I put in. There we go. You can find.
We can also circulate some of your contact details or your social media pages. That makes it easier for people to find you. That's brilliant. If there's any more questions, then please do pop them in the chat. We'll keep an eye on that, please. Faith as well, if you could do that, that'd be great. And whilst your thoughts are kind of marinating, just to say a huge thank you. That was a fantastic session to really help advance us with some of the skills. I feel like sometimes, especially when we're working with fabric and material, just even understanding the basic running stitch or something that can be easily applicable in the classroom could be a nice stimulus to see what comes from that and see how students can develop their ideas from that one skill that they've learned, and then maybe in time changing the material or maybe changing the stimulus or the color, or if they're working together or independently. I think there's loads of variables that can be changed within what you've given us today, Ophelia. So thank you so much.
You're welcome. Thank you.
And with that being said, just to let you know that alongside our CPDs, we also have our support sessions. So on the screen, you've got the next teacher support sessions that are coming up. And these are really informal opportunities for you to come share your practice. Maybe you've gained some new skills or inspiration from the Make Along session today, and it'd be a great opportunity for us to speak again and to share that. And in this next particular one, we are going to be going through the submission process, just walk you through that so that we can make the process itself as smooth as possible when the time comes. And just to bring your attention to our next CPD, our final CPD is on Thursday, the 27th of February. And we will have Michelle from NSEAD speaking to us about the anti-racist education and how the checklist that they use at NSEAD and the approach that they have there can be applied to all of the equity issues that we might face at schools and in the classrooms. And we'll also have a make-along session with Sam Eyre, who is going to be exploring the final theme of renewable materials. So hopefully get to see you again there. Before we leave, it'd be a lovely opportunity for us just to do some reflections. So on your screen, we have got a QR code, which will take you to our Slido page. And we would really like you to think about 3 words to describe how you found this session. And be sure to pop each 3-word individually into the chat so that we can see an overview of some of the key words. So it could be something that you've learnt, it could be the way that you're feeling, it could be something that you want to take, an approach that you want to take into your classroom. So please, before you leave, it'll be really lovely for you to leave some reflections for us as well. And that's it for today. So unless you've got any final questions, just another huge thank you to Paula Briggs and to Ophelia Dos Santos for your expertise, for your experiences, and for sharing your skills and knowledge about craft. And we really look forward to seeing you again soon. Thank you.